The current drawing installation?
I think so, yeah. Okay. Oh, a hush fell over the room. I love it. Okay. I'm going to give people just another minute or two to find places and seats. Plenty of room in the front row, kids, I'm just saying. Don't be shy, okay? Don't hold back.
There may be presents up here in the front row.
Exactly. I'm just saying, they might be missing out, right?
Scholarships.
Job offerings, I'm just saying. You know, I mean, you want to know what it takes. Sometimes it takes sitting in the front row, as it turns out. But, okay, we've closed the door. We've cut everyone else off. They can sneak in later if they want to. A lot of traffic. Did you have trouble getting here?
A lot of traffic.
A lot of traffic.
Down by City Hall, a lot of traffic.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you could make it.
Me too. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm thrilled to have you, and I'm thrilled to have all of you. So thank you so much for coming. I'm curious, how many of you have been to a Dialogues before? How many of you have come here before? Oh, okay. So a lot of return people, but a lot of people are here for the first time. And so that David and I can get a perspective, how many students do we have in the room? Wow, okay, quite a few. Love this. Okay. So David, there's a lot of pressure on you because I think a lot of students are looking for some
advice.
A little bit. So we're going to talk about that. Okay. But first, I'm going to do a quick setup and talk about what we're doing here. And I'm going to thank you all again for coming. I am so excited that we are kicking off this season of Dialogues on Design with this gentleman here. It's pretty fantastic. For those of you that might not know, I am Dennis Scully. I'm the host of the Business of Home podcast, and I'm also the curator of the Dialogues on Design series here at the New York School of Interior Design. And I am thrilled to have you all here. Kayla, thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. For those of you that might not know, this is a fundraising effort to help raise money for our various scholarship programs at the school. So through individual ticket sales and subscriptions and the generous donations of some people who have contributed to the school to support Dialogues on Design, we raise money for various scholarship programs, including our diversity scholarship program and our pre-college scholarship program. And I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for supporting and the people that are listed here who gave so generously. And I wonder if you could join me in a round of applause for all of the generous people who helped to make this possible. Their generosity is greatly appreciated. Now I'm going to embarrass David for just a quick moment as I rattle off the many awards that David has won over the years. Sorry about this, David. It's going to go by very quickly, okay?
Could be worse.
Yeah, could be worse. Could be worse. But all kidding aside, it's tremendous to be able to kick off the season with a visionary architect and designer who, among his many awards, a Tony Award, a Presidential Design Award, a Drama Desk Award. He's in the Interior Design Hall of Fame. He's on the AD 100 Hall of Fame. But perhaps more importantly, recently a recipient of an honorary degree from the New York School of Interior Design, which I assume,
Thank you.
which I assume is probably the most meaningful for you in the short term.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I would think. David was kind enough to come and inspire our graduating students last year at our commencement, and we are very grateful for that. David is just as well known for his philanthropic efforts, his many years of support of DIFA, City Meals on Wheels, and numerous organizations that aid and uplift our community, and we are grateful for that as well. Will you please join me in welcoming David Rockwell? Thank you. So David, as you saw, the room is packed with students, right? They're pretty eager to hear. But before we start telling them all the things you're looking for in a new hire, I want I want to tell people a little bit of your story so that they get some context. And I truthfully want to understand better 12-year-old David getting in the back of the family station wagon and driving from, was it New Jersey at the time? To
the Jersey Shore to Guadalajara, Mexico.
To Guadalajara, Mexico?
Yeah.
So tell us about that adventure. Let's start there.
I want to start also by saying the commencement address was an amazing experience, and what was amazing about it is hearing the students. And it was, in fact, just being there brought back memories of being back in school and concerns about having incompletions and finishing projects and that kind of like energy of school, which was so intense. But the students were incredible and inspiring. So for those of you who were there and spoke, it was a great event.
Well, I was going to come to this in a moment, David, but I'm so glad you mentioned this, because if I recall, when you first got to Syracuse and you were ready to pursue being an architect, you, for a moment, might have thought that you had made a mistake and chosen the wrong path, and it sounded like you needed a little bucking up to stay on course. Tell us about that, since you brought up your school memories.
So, as you said, I went from the Jersey Shore. My dad sold his business. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. So he decided to move to Guadalajara, Mexico. And as a 12-year-old, you don't really understand what a seismic shift that's going to be. And I had already fallen in love with community theater. And part of the reason I think everyone who's a designer, you hopefully get to a point where you understand the things you're interested, your personal preferences, the things you're curious about are driven by personal choices you make or personal experiences you have. So I had an experience of lots of transition. I'd lived in Chicago, we moved to the Jersey Shore. So I think there was a sense of newness for me getting to Guadalajara, which was a phenomenal experience, a great place to fall in love with design and fall in love with public space and marketplaces and color. And there's no question my sense of color and lighting is totally formed by those experiences in Guadalajara, where the quality of light was so amazing. But I played piano. There were a few things I did. At around 16 or 17, I got interested in architecture, primarily through the buildings in Mexico. Has anyone been to Guadalajara? Any Guadalajara?
Show of hands, any Guadalajara? Okay.
So there's a market there, one of the great markets in the world, called Mercado Libertad, that is a kind of modernist structure filled with the most amazing thousands and thousands of square meters of stuff. So I was interested in architecture, I was interested in music, I was interested in theater, and I decided to apply to several architecture schools and got in. And got to Syracuse. I had my Mexican sandals on and full of enthusiasm. And, I didn't know how cutthroat it was going to be. So we had a basic design, and the basic design first brief was go out on campus and just draw something you're inspired by. So I sat there and I looked at a tree and looked at Hendrick's Chapel, and I started drawing a little detail of it that I thought was quite pretty. And I looked to my right, and the student there had drawn the entire campus with like an MC Escher thing. And I thought, wow, so it's going to be like that. And then that night, the students were invited to hear Buckminster Fuller speak. I don't know if any of you have heard Buckminster Fuller speak, but it is packed and dense and opaque. And, I got the top 15% of it, but I was sitting there listening to this, did the sketch. So the next day I came into class and I went to see my basic design professor. And I said, I may have made a mistake.
This might not be for me. I'm just saying.
And he said something that stuck with me to this day that was so incredibly helpful. He said, you know what, just stick with it. Maybe you have less to unlearn than other people. And he was a fantastic teacher. That sense of not knowing the answer, I do think has driven my life. I think that sense as a designer of wanting to figure out what's next, that interest in newness that came from moving around as a kid, that curiosity. And then at school, the next big project was, is you're often given a figure ground. We had to do a figure ground, and then we're given a dimension. So I started doing it based on writing a backstory of who was living in the figure ground. And the teacher came over and said, that's not the project, it makes no sense. And I said, well, it helps me. Having a narrative helps me. And those were formative things that, that now having our studio have its 40th anniversary this year, you get to look in the rearview mirror and see what connects the things you're interested in. At the time, it was just pure energy and passion and panic and excitement.
Well, and the desire, you speak often about thinking about an audience.
Correct.
And telling a story and creating a narrative for anything that you do.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that.
Well, that started really early on. My mom had been a dancer in vaudeville, believe it or not. And so, by the time I was around, it was community theater. But in this little suburb of New Jersey with big, giant houses, a lot of them Bob Stern houses, the summer, there was a community theater that happened that just activated the whole town. And it was amazing how it just brought everyone together. And as a young kid, I said, this is really what interests me. What interests me is how every part of this town that's really defined by private homes becomes public during this piece. And I recently brought my daughter back to see the theater where we did plays, which was really the Scoom Gymnasium, and it was about the size of this room. But I remember it being the size of the Hirschfeld Theater. My memory of it was based on the experience, not the physicality of it. So that interest in audience probably is my desire to create community. And before we left for Mexico, my dad took me and my brothers into the city to see my first Broadway show, Fiddler on the Roof, and my first New York City meal. And I was just in love with how incredibly diverse it was, and how at the theater you'd see 1,300 people become a community around storytelling. And I knew I wanted to do that. And I thought the idea of music and design and choreography all creating this incredible moment that only exists for the time you're there. And I think as designers, we sometimes don't think about that, what we're creating is about setting the stage for that spontaneous moment. And that was at the forefront of my thinking.
And that experience made such an impact on you when you were 12. And by the way, Mother, he went to Schrafft's with his father right before they went to the theater. That was, my parents, I think, used to court quite a bit at Schrafft's. So
he just aged me right there.
Yeah, just right.
You catch that? It's like.
No, that wasn't my point. I think that's such a wonderful memory, and it made such a lasting impact on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you later think about it so much, as you've talked about, when you created restaurant spaces and thinking about what's the restaurant like when there's just a few people in it, what's it feel like when there's a lot of people in it, and just creating that.
Yeah, and my sense memory, it was a long time ago, but my sense memory also has to do with the sound. And we have designed some very loud restaurants and not so loud restaurants, but I think the one thing about the kind of landscape of a restaurant is feeling alive, that you're hearing the clinking of glasses, and you're with your own table. And I was always fascinated with how lighting in a candle is almost like a hearth for the people who are at the table, but there's many of those that coexist that you're connecting. And Schrafft's was all women owned, and it was a kind of amazing place. There were many of them in New York that were the place to go pre-theater.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful chain restaurant that sadly no longer exists. But I want to hear a little bit more. So going back to Syracuse and your experience there, you do find your own way, and you end up thriving there. And tell me what comes next.
At Syracuse?
Yeah, and once you get out of school and.
what was fascinating about design school for me was seeing how many solutions there were to the same problem. So it was really interesting for me to see that and to have that experience of starting from nothing and building something, and of course learning all the skills you need to learn and trying to integrate the things I were interested in. And I have to say Syracuse, which was very much a modernist school, really allowed me to keep alive those things I was most interested in. And so I was pleased about that. I did study in London at the Architectural Association at a year abroad. I came back and didn't want to go right back to school. And I took off a semester and worked for a lighting designer. And the way that happened was in school at Syracuse, I had been studying this theater at USC that was totally modular. Everything moved, floors, walls, ceiling. And I was interested, and I reached out to the university. I reached out to the theater consultant named Jules Fisher, who's a legendary lighting designer. I didn't know that at the time. And he was amazingly friendly. We became good friends. And when I came back from London, I called him and I said, I'd like to get a job working in the theater just to see what that's like. So he introduced me to this lighting designer, and I showed up with a ridiculous wood box portfolio I'd made in London of all my drawings. And I was sure we're going to change the world, my airport designs. And I said, I'll work for you for free for a couple weeks and see how it goes. And he is an incredibly generous man. And actually, decades later, when I designed the Kodak Theater, I brought him on board as a theater consultant. So we got to give him work. So I worked there. He was also a theater consultant. So as students, you may not have gotten to the getting the job part. But one of the things you realize is what you're doing may not be what you think you're going to do. You may be detailing doors, and in this case, I was detailing rigging systems. But at night, I could go to the theater where he was teching a show, which was incredible. But no one got along on that show. It was just it was like total shit show.
Tell me more.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay.
Anyway, I went back to architecture school, having gotten that out of my system, and finished my degree there, and then came to New York and did a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump the gun. As students, the one thing I'll say about everything I did was not knowing what the next piece is going to be. And I think that's one of the challenges is to figure out how to dive in without predicting what the next 3 or 4 steps are going to be.
And you talk about that a lot, this notion of a beginner's mindset,
Yeah.
and not wanting to have things all figured out. Elaborate on that.
We don't tell that to clients, by the way.
You don't set them up that way, but for yourself.
Yeah, I think curiosity is so important, and I think there's so many ways to approach design, including having a kind of vocabulary that you use from project to project, and I envy that in some ways. It's just not how we work. So we start each project with building a kind of narrative, point of view, deep research, and try and find some unexpected connection. And that's really from the first project I ever did, was trying to find something that exists at the intersection of other ideas. And so beginner's mind, the person who really opened my eyes to that was Richard Warman, who created the TED conference. And he asked me to speak in 96 or 97. And he said, please, and he, by the way, always wanted restaurant reservations when he came to New York. He had no problem calling me, I want a reservation for Nobu. But he said, please don't talk about restaurants, because really our first decade was all restaurants. That was, and I had to kind of will myself to do other things. I literally thought about the things that interest me that relate to hospitality and thought about how do I get into those lines of work. And it took years of meeting and pursuing and thinking and strategizing and sketching. But he said, talk about something you're an amateur at that you just love. So I put together a talk on the relationship of theater and architecture. That was the first time I talked about that. And that led to 3 or 4 years later being offered a Broadway show, but after meeting with directors, sketching for free for many years and pursuing it. But it did open my mind to the idea that, and I think about our work, a lot of our best work are first when we're doing something for the first time.
You think that's often your best work?
I do.
Interesting.
You have to replicate that. So I obviously can't do my first restaurant.
Right.
But recently when we were hired to do Coco Doc, which is this fried chicken restaurant on 22nd Street, I put myself in the mind of, in the restaurant experience, what can I find about that that's totally specific and couldn't exist anywhere else? And it became walking in to a soapstone wall with 3 lavatories with lots of soaps. So the ritual of washing your hands was, part of the fried chicken experience. And the lighting was all based on trying to create the kind of glimmer of glistening oil. So the first I'm talking about are first airport, first Broadway show, things like that. But you have to replicate that for yourself by creating new stakes and new ideas.
As you just referenced, it took you years before you got your first Broadway show, and as you were just saying, you spent years working for people for free or offering them your ideas, and it didn't really go anywhere. And you touched on something a few minutes ago where you said, at first you might not be doing what you think you're going to be doing, or you might not get to do what you think you're going to be doing. And I want the students to hear that and hear you talk about that a little bit more, and how they should level set their expectations maybe in that context.
Well, it seems to me one of the keys, and the students I see that really soar in my observation of working for different studios in our studio, and the architects who come from other places and work with us, in my own experience, that the similar thing is fully committing to the thing you're doing right now and really falling in love with that, and embracing every part of it. And someone I worked for early on gave me the advice of get a tape measure and start to measure things that you like and start to understand distances between things. But I think we live in such a digital age that finding as much as you can about the materiality, the specifics, and not trying to jump to worrying about every other part about it.
Yeah.
In the theater thing, when I speak to students or other architects who say, well, how did theater happen? I think it happened because it was really just part of what was in me. And it took a lot of time and effort to get the toolbox to be able to do that and study. And I went to the theater 2 times a week, probably my entire adult life, long before I worked in the theater. So whatever that is for you may not be theater. It may be fabrics. It may be lighting. It could be anything. But I think it means pay attention to what your kind of eccentric edges are.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because so today, because you're so associated with the theater, people might think that all that happened for you right away. But that wasn't at all what happened, and it took you many years. And as you say, tell us about the very early days of your firm, so that people get an idea, and the kinds of projects that you first worked on.
So I did a number of jobs out of school. My last job before starting to do freelance work was with a really very amazing, talented architect who did a very specific thing. It was recording studios, and he was and is the best at that. But a project came to his studio that he wasn't that interested in, or I was more interested in, but I was the lead on it at a very young age. And literally I could sketch the sconces and the carpet pattern now because it was such a ingrained thing, and it was life and death. I think making design in some ways life and death of getting it right. And it was a club on East 54th Street that opened up in pretty much a disaster. It looked great, but it was a kind of a disaster. But someone who went there said to me, I'm doing a restaurant renovation, or a friend of mine is doing a restaurant, and it has to open in about 5 or 6 weeks. Do you think you could help? And I said, sure, I can do that.
Sure. How hard could that be?
So that was sort of jumping into the fire, and there wasn't a we, it was me. And I brought in some of the set workers from La Mama, a downtown theater group, to help build it. We worked 3 shifts and renovated it, and that led to an offer to do a restaurant on 46th Street called Sushi Zen, which was 1984. And I said yes. I spoke to a friend of mine who had a little extra office space. So I worked out of there, and that's how I began. And Sushi Zen was an extraordinary experience for me. It was, I didn't realize it was only 18 feet wide. It was very narrow. And I did what I tell people who work for me definitely not to do, which is don't put every idea you have into your first project. But I did. And it brought to life ideas that, I think you bring your ideas with you. So from the time in Guadalajara, I was very interested in open views and sunsets and kind of the quality of light, as I mentioned. So I brought in Donna Granada, who was a costume designer from the Santa Fe Opera Festival, and one entire wall was a 3-level silk mural that was a kind of Japanese sunset. Down the middle of the floor, I put glass blocks, uplighting, creating ritual. I've always been interested in ritual, which I think is a theater thing that there's before theater. And that got a lot of attention. And so I had no real insight into restaurants. I was interested in the ritual of dining. And in Mexico, I was interested in the restaurants that were only there for one night a week, like someone's house where they would create a dish and kind of sense of occasion. But Sushi Zen really led to being offered other restaurants and deciding to have a real firm. By the way, about 6 weeks before it opened, the owner said they didn't have the money to pay for the edge lighting to uplight the silk mural. And I borrowed the money from a friend to give them to finish it, because it was so unthinkable to me that after all this, it wasn't going to be lit.
So the firm started in a deficit because you had already borrowed some money. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That was
I recommend that.
It sounds like you have some interesting philosophies around all of this. But what was your notion of building a firm at the time? Because as we've talked about, 40 years in now, and the firm is sizable, and we'll talk about that. But in the early days, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were, what I'm doing is life and death, and I'm not worrying about how it links to the next thing. Thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely.
What a hospitable mood.
Look at that. Look how I'm taking care of you. Yeah.
Literally, I didn't think about how it was going to piece together. I cared about the work. And that led to a number of other places. And in like 92, that was a year where in the same year we did a restaurant for Jean-Georges, and by then we were a small we. The first Nobu. And I really had no idea. I think it helps not, I really think it helps not to worry about the outcome. I know that sounds difficult to enact, but I had no idea Nobu was going to be
That was going to be this huge thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And had I known it, I probably would have had a safer design. I mean, that was an outrageous design at the time. There was never a 3-star restaurant with no tablecloths and these kind of trees that arched up to the ceiling. So that year, I started to realize I wanted to think more about what was going to be next, and started to think. I did these diagrams looking at all the things I was interested in and figured out what other verticals are natural extensions. And I think I also think things take time. I don't think you can instantly turn on a switch and have things happen. So there's many projects we've done where we've known the client. Danny Meyer I knew for 10 years before we worked for him. He claims I badgered him before that, but I don't think
Not very well if it took 10 years, right? I mean,
it was a slow badger.
yes.
The best kind.
But in the end, a great partnership.
A great partnership,
relationship. Yeah. But were you conscious of building a firm, or did it happen more because of the jobs that you got and the work that came in?
I think I was conscious of working with people I really wanted to work with. And so what happened was, I think I attracted and we attracted great people who wanted to be part of a mission-led firm. And the mission was about creating places that kind of supercharge and connect these moments that in many cases are ephemeral. So thinking about restaurant experiences being ephemeral, hopefully not the restaurant, you can see where that connects to theater, which is, only happens the night you're there. So I think we attracted really strong people, many who have been there 20, 25 years, 30 years, who helped create a structure that has offered a lot of other people the ability to grow and learn. And I've continued to be curious in other things that we've expanded into. For instance, we have a technology group called The Lab, which to say I'm not a technology person is such a radical understatement. But it was something we needed on a project in 2008. I was looking for a technology consultant who could figure out how to use projection to connect people, not to separate people. And we couldn't find the right consultant, so I put together a SWAT team, and that's continued to grow and venture. And so I guess the answer is I didn't think about building, I certainly never thought about having a firm of the scale we are. I thought about doing things that I loved. I think a lot of other people wanted to be a part of that, and then I think success attracted other people. And I think I'm pretty obsessed about not being defined in a box. Yeah. And I think that's the way people, there are people who think of me as a theater designer, which is incredible, because I did think when I started working in the theater, I can't believe I'm telling this story, but I said to an amazing director, you told me that the theater is very competitive. I'm feeling so welcomed and loved here in the theater, my first show. And he said, well, they're not sure you're sticking around. But it's an amazing community. But I was concerned about being an outsider and kind of building credibility step by step. So the fact that you might perceive, so theater was way after the fact, and but now I think what's interesting is to integrate that kind of theater into other spaces we're doing. We just finished a project for Johns Hopkins that I would not have been able to do 6 or 7 years ago. I wouldn't have had the experience to make some of the decisions we made.
We're going to look at a whole slew of images.
There's way too many images.
There's a lot of images here, David. And it's going to.
I thought you were going to edit them.
Well, listen, we're going to go through some of them very quickly. But it's going to show the diversity of your work. And it sounds as though, as you were just describing, you like to constantly be mixing it up and not doing the same thing.
I think that's really life-giving.
That's life.
Is replicating the sense of not knowing the answer.
Yeah. You talked about being mission-driven and the people that have joined you, and many of whom, as you suggest, have stayed for quite some time. This group over here is very keen to know what you really look for in candidates today when you think of future team members. What have you learned over the years that you find leads to success for people that join your firm?
That's such a hard question. That's like an essay question, right?
Take your time, no pressure. Yeah.
Well, the reality is, for someone to join our studio, and we're now 300 people with 8 studios.
300 people, you heard that, right? Yeah, it's huge.
So for someone to succeed, I think they need the following things. First of all, there has to be someone within my studio who's a leader who is looking for someone to do what they do. So, we're constantly looking for new people. In interviews, one of the questions I like to ask, which now will have no impact because you've...
Because I'll put it out there, yeah.
Is to sort of find out what people think their superpower is, and ask what they think they need to build. I think understanding what your strengths are and what you may want to build that isn't your strength is a good thing, and I try and do that as well in our work. I think coming in with eagerness I think having people who apply for work who really look at the work and specifically want to work with us and have reasons they want to work with us and have taken the time to look at things and have a perception on the world and have their own point of view and some skill that will allow them to on-ramp in some way, and that's different for different people. So we have model makers, we have lots of different kinds of things. We have every group you can think of. But coming with an original spark, some skills, some knowledge of where you're applying for work, and some willingness to really dig in, I think are probably the keys.
Okay.
And
no.
That's it.
Really? Yeah? Okay.
I was going to go too far and I stopped myself.
No, I see, and I want to, were you just about to, no? Okay.
We have a lot of dogs in the office. We have maybe 10 or 12 dogs that come in every day. So I'd recommend if you want a job with us, if you don't like dogs,
okay,
not the right place.
Good tip there, yeah. So dog people?
Because we have had people come in and say, I don't like dogs. And I'm thinking, you didn't do research.
Really? Did they not even look at the website? The dogs,
The dogs are on the website.
Yes.
You've seen it.
Okay. Well, those people are disqualified right away.
No research.
No research. No. Don't even bother with those people. Okay, last thing before, no, go ahead.
One other very important quality is having a sense of really want to make a difference. I think we want people who really want to make a difference, and it's, I think, the best thing about working there.
Yeah, and that seems very central to the firm. I want to touch on Sidney Bernstein just for a minute, just because I want to give the audience the context of you also challenging yourself to always be pushing yourself and be a beginner of sorts. So Sidney Bernstein is you tell the story of your piano instructor.
Seymour Bernstein,
excuse me. Yes, tell about Seymour Bernstein.
Well, as I mentioned, in high school I played piano, and there was always piano in my house. My dad played piano, my brothers played piano. And I played piano not well, but a lot. So people who went to high school with me remember me sight reading music, and there was always a piano there. And actually, that same first year in architecture school, we were asked to do a project where we analyzed our personal space. And I was showing my son the acetate layer thing that I did. But one of the things we did was think about, in our history growing up, what are the things that define our personal space? And there was always a piano in mine, even though I didn't really play very well. And So I got to college, I really didn't play then. Graduated, came to New York. I still always had a piano in my house. But about 8 or 9 years ago, I decided, what would it be like to really play a Chopin prelude and play every note in it and really understand it, which was so far away from where I was. I would sight read the notes that were accessible and by ear understand rhythm. So I lucked into meeting Seymour Bernstein, who's 97. And there's an amazing film about him called Seymour Bernstein, An Introduction, if you're interested, on iTunes or Apple or something. Netflix.
Some tech-related thing, yeah.
So I got in touch with him, and he's kind of a legend. He was 89 then, so it was 8 years ago. And I went to his apartment that he had been in for like 70 years with a cast of Chopin's Hand. It was like, oh my God. And he was this loving guy, as you'll see in the movie. And I played a little bit of the Chopin prelude for him. And there was kind of a silence, and he said, you know, you seem like a nice guy. But I think what you really need to do is build skills. So you need to practice scales for a couple years and come back and see me and we'll talk. And I don't know what possessed me to say, you know, that's not going to happen. This is either go or not go. Like, I've made the decision to try this. I need to be inspired. I'm not going to do the other thing. And he said, well, you need to take a lesson every week. You need to practice 3 or 4 hours a week. So that really was a change in my life in many ways. He was a profound pivot. And so now I practice 8 or 9 hours a week.
Yeah.
I gave a couple of recitals, and he's been a major factor. Maybe the best teacher I've ever had.
Yeah, it's tremendous. I so admire that. Okay, we're moving on now to these exciting images, David, and tell us what we're looking at here.
So,
getting into the theater, Kayla. Here we go.
This is a show called She Loves Me. It opened at Studio 54. It won the Tony Award for Best Set, which was unbelievable. If you know the movie You Got Mail, it's the same story as that. So this is a perfume store in this beautiful town, kind of Renaissance first perspective. And the show deals with all of these people who work in the store, 2 in particular who are in love by mail, but don't know that they're in love with the person in the store. So it deals with inner and outer lives and kind of how we cope with that. So I don't know if the next slide, but that's what it opens up to. So the first slide is a store, and the director and the cast say that, you know, this was a case where we had to develop the mechanics of how you go from very small to very big. So it involved lots of amazing craftsmen and artisans and shops and hundreds of custom perfume bottles, and amazing experience. And actually the writer of it was the writer of Fiddler on the Roof, as you may know.
Oh, yeah, so right, okay.
I don't know if you guys do sketch projects, but I remember in school loving short sketch projects, and Into the Woods was a show that was at Encores at City Center, which does shows that run 2 weeks only, sometimes a week. So it's a sketch project, very little resource, and you have to kind of get the essence of an idea. So without going into too much about Into the Woods, but it's a Sondheim show. Sondheim had just passed away. Beautiful show about the first half is a fairy tale, and the second half is the deconstructing of the nightmare version of that fairy tale. So it's really about kind of magic and loss. So these 3 houses that you see represent the baker, the prince, and the cow. The cow, by the way, stole the show entirely. That cow was amazing. So we made these at our model shop, and these small houses flew out, and I think the next image is the main set. So these are different diameter, like sonotubes, that are cut into them, so you see the tree and the negative space in the tree, and you can see how the rest of the set relates to that. So super simple, but very powerful, like a sketch project. This we just completed the Perlman Performing Arts Center, which is the Performing Arts Center downtown. We were brought on board when Rex had already gotten the cube, the marble cube, well into development, and we were asked to develop the lobby and the restaurant. And the cube is a magnificent building, elevated, I think, 18 feet in the air. But I felt like what we could do with the lobby is create a welcome mat. And the stair is quite steep. So we took the ceiling and created these ribs, wood ribs, that welcome you from the stair and lead you all the way through to the end of the building. And that is the lobby and the restaurant. This is a space in between the glass wall and the stone wall where we have these small seating spaces. And one of my pet peeves about, is this still on? About hotels is when you go into a hotel or a restaurant and you feel like the first 4 people, they sit down, there's no place left to sit. It's laid out in a way that one group dominates it. So we wanted to have pockets of social dining here, so that's why you see these smaller spaces. So Nobu, this is the Nobu world domination slide. But go to the first one, the next one. So that's the first Nobu. I could tell you the person who made every detail there. So the scorched ash trees. We had cherry blossoms stenciled on the floor, which was a kind of reference to Madame Butterfly. And Nobu, who really is an amazing genius and has had such a big impact on food, when I met with him, he was very quiet, and he said, you know, what I care most about is the relationship of the sushi chef to the customer. So we put the sushi bar backed up to the kitchen with that glazed tile wall that was handmade. And when you came in, the sushi chef would be able to yell your name, in which Larry David spoofed on Curb Your Enthusiasm. But, and the tables are scorched ash because we wanted no design at the table other than texture, that the sense of touch would be engaged. This is Nobu downtown. It moved. This may be one of the restaurants I'm proudest of because it's a landmark space, very restrictive, but we did get landmarks to approve this one scorched ash, almost like frozen swoosh, like origami or like calligraphy in space that leads you downstairs. And this is how that's how it was. This is how it is now. This is Nobu Dubai, where their budgets, probably the budget for the bar was more than the budget for the original Nobu. This is a place I mentioned, Coco Duck on 22nd Street. And it was one of those very special times where the food, the attitude, and the design were totally linked, and it totally clicked. And it's quite simple and quite Baroque and elaborate all at the same time. And the quality of light is really what it's known for. So this is called Bath House. It's in the Flatiron District on 22nd Street. Have any of you been there? Yes. So I mentioned we always want to have a narrative. And part of what we had to do here was create a space that would bring people way deep into the space and go downstairs. So just to backtrack for a second, I realized how much I love stairs. I did a little 5-minute TED video on the history of stairs, and I realized one of the reasons I love stairs was when I started working in New York, all the spaces we got to work on were downstairs or upstairs because of high rents on the ground floor. So I fell in love, like Rosa Mexicana, with stairs as a function.
Yeah.
So you can see that this is really about texture and creating individual experiences within this bathhouse. This just opened like 2 months ago on 51st Street. Any of you know Din Tai Fung?
Yeah. Yes.
So, legendary soup dumpling place that had been anticipated in New York. In fact, there were cranky people that it took so long to get here. But they're an amazing group, and I don't know if the next slide shows the kitchen. So, challenging because it was an 11-foot ceiling and 400 seats. So it was a pancake of space. And the way we dealt with that was creating these more intimate spaces with screens and lights, and then the glass wall that you see there, for some reason we photographed, it's like photographing a set without a cast. But when you go there to eat, there's 30 people making dumplings in that. So it's like an indie movie in the middle of a kind of feature film.
How fun.
This hasn't opened yet. It's at 1 Madison, which is an addition to a beautiful building. And we put this structure on the roof, and it's a event space that's going to be used by Danielle Ballou. If you go to the next one, I think it shows what it's like on the inside. Beautiful, beautiful view, and just a chance to, I mean, I love the opportunity to work with these amazing people in these amazing locations. You'll see a lot of use of cork in a lot of our work. Someone has their phone on.
Yeah, they're trying to record it, but no. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. You were talking about using a lot of cork.
Well, we'll get to that at the end.
We'll get to the cork, exactly. Okay.
This hasn't, what is that? Oh, that's a Photoshop. Those look like real people. So on the ground floor of that building, we're doing a steakhouse for Danielle Ballou that opens in the middle of November. And one of the things we're doing is marrying kind of classic French shapes, but with more contemporary, lighter fabrics, like the tufted fabric around the perimeter. And the hero, the story in this restaurant is going to be the kitchen with an open grill and then a beautiful metal hood that's going to wrap around it that doesn't arrive till November 12th. This was an amazing opportunity. We did the Union Square W 20 years ago, the first time, and I work on Union Square, and it was a chance to create a living room to the city, and everything was great about it. And then they asked us if we would renovate it. They wanted to renovate it. And so it was a rare chance to have a 20-year look on a project. And so it kind of marries thoughts about the city. Union Square, if you want to create a narrative, Union Square is very urban. It's got lots of contemporary things. It also has farm-to-table market. It has these beautiful mansard roofs. So we got Chantel Martin to do the murals on the two sides. And then this glass wall hugs the stair, and then this explosion of color in the carpet that is, to say that's the color scheme used in the rest of the hotel. There's no colors left really with that, but Union Square is there from all seasons, so as you go through the hotel, you'll see seasonality really celebrated. This is the restaurant that's part of the Union Square W, called Seahorse, and will open pretty soon. And that mural you see was done by muralists in Brooklyn named In View. And it was interesting. We wanted to create a place that felt sort of like an instant classic. And I know clients always tell us they want something timeless. And I always feel like I need to remind them that to be timeless, you have to be willing to be timely. If you just go right to timeless, it's such a, I think, a safe approach. In this case, we wanted something that felt like it had been there for some time, but yet was fresh and new. So that's what this is. And this is the Union Square W second floor. This is a historic ballroom that had been there all these years, but was just a event space. So the way we activated this was that stair with the spilling carpet we thought was strong enough that guests would accept the lobby being upstairs. So this is now the lobby. The W Hollywood, we just recently renovated, and a total gut renovation. And we had one realization that helped us here, and that was that even though it's in the kind of middle of buzzy Hollywood, what people really want is a residential scale version of Hollywood, like those classic Hollywood homes. So we organized it around these outdoor spaces. The lobby. This is the Johns Hopkins project I mentioned. And one thing I'll point out is the stairs at the bottom with the banquettes on it. So the project was every graduate program at Johns Hopkins, most of the graduate programs would have a piece of this building in DC. So it really was totally collaborative, where they wanted people who walk in to see what other students are doing. So literally cross-pollinating different programs and ideas. And the other goal was to get as many of the faculty out of their offices into the public space engaging with students. So it wanted to be space that was an attractor that in some ways helped market and promote all the different activities. So that led to this series of rooms that you see that are kind of glassed in conference rooms. The stair requires you to move around them. But that place that's called the beach, because that's what it's called in Baltimore, the grassy knoll, Hopkins was nervous about just having continuous bleachers, which is kind of a design thing you see a lot these days, that places have them. And the way we handled that was by interspersing it with these banquettes and sofas and workspaces. So within this big space, you've got your own little space, so you can be both public and private. So that's the part of it I'm proudest of. It's a great terrace.
Nice view.
Yeah. This is in 550 Madison, which is the Philip Johnson Chippendale building, for those who know that, on 56th Street. It has these beautiful windows at the top, and Philip Johnson was on the cover of Newsweek, I think, at the time, holding a model of it with a Chippendale top. It was a great project, so we had a chance to totally renovate it, and these two paintings were there by Dorothea Rockburn, who's, I think, 90-something. So we sort of celebrated the painting, celebrated the window, created this mobile light fixture that was based on the paintings and what she was up to. And there's a number of spaces, including this library. So it's amenities for people that work there, but our observation was they don't want one big space, they want smaller spaces that they can work in. Another one of the spaces there. I'm not sure why this is in there, but I love that color green. So that Neue House is a co-working space on 25th Street that when it was a case where they came to us before they picked the space. So we got to have some input into the space. And we recently, after 10 years, renovated the lower level and created the screening room. I guess it's just there.
Planting a seed with everyone in the audience that we're going to be coming around in just a little bit with microphones for people who might have questions. So think of your questions, and then we'll come to you in just a little bit. But he loves this green, so that's why the slide's in here.
I also like this color too. And I like the relationship between the two. So they're there because I like them. This is a new project that opens up in the fall, and I think it's an example of not worrying about scale or significance, but worrying about the mission of the project. So this little theater lab is about 1,000 square feet. It's going to be part of Lincoln Center. Harvey Fierstein gave them the gift. We entered a competition, and it's going to be a kind of new version of a black box performance theater space that will work with their amazing collection. So for any of you who are theater fans, you can go to Lincoln Center Library of the Performing Arts, and they have archives of film performances. They have the set designs. They have all of the kind of pieces that made up the projects, and this will be a little lab space for that.
Fantastic.
And there it is.
Yeah.
So you mentioned our interest in pro bono, which I think grows out of the most impactful things our firm has done are the self-initiated ones that come out of realizing design can make a big difference, starting with my involvement with DIFA, which grew out of my brother dying of AIDS, and being the last of his group of friends. So really being in New York with this devastation. And I went to a DIFA event. I was invited. And I realized, like, I'm not sure all these designers realize that creativity is a kind of answer to making a difference. And the guy who was executive director misrepresented how much work it would be to be the chairman. But it was an amazing, profound honor to serve with DIFA for so many years. This is a viewing platform at Ground Zero, and it came out of 9/11, which my office watched the building fall from the roof of our building on Union Square. So we were approached a week after by a school in Lower Manhattan saying, we know you create, great restaurants. Could you help us move PS 234 from Tribeca to 13th Street? Many people in my office said this was like a cathartic moment. So we brought in artists, we brought in other people. We helped kind of renovate the school. And out of that, the city approached us and said, we need someone to create a VIP viewing platform at Ground Zero for visiting dignitaries. And we thought about it and said, well, what if we create a public viewing platform? Because at that point, no one could really see what was happening in Lower New York. It was totally mediated through TV. So we partnered with Liz Diller and Rick Scafidio and Kevin Kennan and raised the money and got this viewing platform built at the end of December. So like 110 days from go to built. So it was a chance for us to realize we really could rally resources. And it was our first public-private project to see how that worked. And long story, but this is a playground called Imagination Playground that grew out of that opportunity with the city. And we did portable playgrounds, test play dates. It was a 5-year development opportunity to think about, I guess, my early experiences with making creative play and researching playgrounds and realizing most playgrounds were linear play. And there were these great play spaces starting in and around London post-World War II called adventure playgrounds, which were kids making things. And so we brought someone from there, we got the city involved, and we developed Imagination Playground, which is in the Seaport, and it led to 7,000 portable playgrounds around the world.
Fantastic.
And during the pandemic, we helped the city develop the guidelines for outdoor dining. And I think more importantly, partnered with Melba, who's a friend in Harlem, and raised money for the day that what we realized, of course, was for restaurants to reopen, walking around the city was like being in an empty theater. It missed all the life of what brought the city to life. And we had to create a way to get the staff back safely and customers back safely. So it became a way to fund these various restaurants in all 5 boroughs. And that led to community-driven installations. And this was in Chinatown, which was the first of outdoor dining that was really serving multiple restaurants in a community. And DOT, it required the city to work together. And in crisis, people work together more than not. And this is the latest initiative called Cork Collective, which we've just launched. We started working with this group called Amarin out of Portugal. That's the biggest cork manufacturer in the world. And we found out that there's 3 billion corks that aren't recycled a year in the US. I mean, it's a major source. And so through a collective of Southern Wine and Spirits, this guy Bill Wachtel, who introduced us, we have an E-Quad vehicle made of cork, and right now we're collecting about 30,000 corks a month, and we're expanding that, and those corks are going to be reground and used for playgrounds and a student prize initiative that we're going to launch at the Milan Furniture Fair next year.
Oh, fantastic. And here's a breakdown of some of the stats. So you're going around and you're collecting.
I'd like to collect some corks tonight.
Did anyone bring any corks? Okay, well
That's a great way to get a job. Bring a cork.
Okay, good tip there. All right, good to.
But you know, what's interesting about it is making something invisible visible, and I think that's what design can do. And it's what we had been designing with cork for a long time, and what unlocked it is the connection to these groups, both the wine manufacturers who were users of the wine, and Amarin. And cork trees are not killed or felled to take the cork off. They're peeled.
So much we didn't know about cork, and
more to know.
We're gonna learn more. It sounds like. Okay, so I want to be able to open it up for questions. I've got another question or two, but I'd rather toss it to the audience. So Karen, I see hands. Fantastic, right here in the back. Yeah, we can get you a mic. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Alana. I'm a student at NYSID, and I also love community theater. And the thing that I love the most about it is the dynamic and live aspect of it. And it seems to me that you too love that and are inspired by that, and it's clear in your interiors. I'm wondering what bridged that gap for you. Because for me, I have so many things that I'm passionate about that I love, but I find myself thinking too hard about how to integrate my passions into my designs.
Well, I don't think you can think about that too hard. I think integrating your passions into your design is a great thing to do. I think the challenging thing is you can't force the outcome. So what I did is I spent decades being a fan of theater and sort of studying it and thinking about it. So when the opportunity presented itself, it really wasn't the opportunity presenting itself. I kind of created that opportunity. So I think you have to look at over a long haul, and I would start by thinking about what it is about a live experience that you love, and think about all those elements, and you can bring those to bear on your work as a designer. Alona, by the way, is one of the names in She Loves Me. Do you know that?
No, I didn't.
It's online if you want to see that production of She Loves Me.
I was just going to say it's yeah, you can stream it. Do you like it when people show up and say they love community theater? Is that a plus when they intro themselves that way?
Totally.
Yeah. Does that get them in the? Okay. Good.
Totally good.
Another tip there. Okay. Who's got a question up here?
I always have a question.
Go ahead, Kayla. We're glad to hear from you.
Yes, thank you for being here. My name is Kayla. I was one of the speakers at graduation, so I'm happy to see you again. Thank you.
You guys were amazing.
Thank you.
And a lot of variety of footwear, because that's the only self-expression, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We talked a lot about that, so I'm happy you noticed. We had to be comfortable, though, too, because stairs. So one of the many that I have, but I'll just put it down to one right now, is in your company at the scale that it is now, how and the projects that you work on, do you have different departments for the restaurant work, the hospitality work? Do you have a department for the theater work that you do? Is that spread out like that, or is it kind of just?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And one of the things we've realized about how we organize is we don't want to have project-specific groups. We want, I think cross-pollination is critical. The one exception is the theater is a separate group, and it's a very small group. It's 2 people. And freelance people when we need them. But it is a different skill set, although we do have 2 or 3 people who were really interested in getting the theater, worked in architecture for many years, and kind of have moved into that. But we try to stay very fluid about what kind of projects go to different teams, and because it avoids being a specialist in one thing.
Okay. Yes, here in the back.
Hi, I'm Ravi, another commencement speaker from.
Oh, in fact, look at that.
Yeah, you
All
said
coming
hello
back. I love it.
Great to see you again. So my question is, I remember David said that hospitality is meant to create a unique story for each individuals. for the night and also for the future as well. And I'm just wondering, in my opinion, that designing a unique experience requires creating certain kind of level of complexity, whether on colors, texture, or patterns. And from my observation on the Rockwell Group's work, I'm just wondering, how do you balance that kind of busyness and complexity with minimalism to create such a comfortable space for people to stay in, but also like creating unique stories for them?
Well, the best way I can answer it is a project we're working on right now, which is incredibly complicated, lots of demands. And I think the way to approach what you're talking about is you have to figure out what's critical to the project. So there are projects where what's critical is, like Din Tai Fung, what was critical to them is their history and their kind of expectation. There was so many expectations. But we wanted to balance what's expected and what's a surprise. So we're always trying to balance a kind of exuberance and restraint. And I think those extremes become great foundations for design.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, here in the back. Go ahead.
Is it on?
Oh,
Here we go. Go ahead. You got it?
oh, multiple mics. Here we go.
We can hear you.
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Rebecca. This is loud. I'm actually a sales rep. I'm a vendor. So
Okay.
I'm coming from probably the very opposite side of where most of these people in this room are.
That's okay. You're still welcome, Rebecca. Don't worry about that. Don't you worry.
Thank you. I did
Yeah.
not feel otherwise. I've worked with your firm on a few various projects with different manufacturers, and my question essentially is, with so many manufacturers out there, and I don't want to say duplicates or copycats, but how do you guide or advise some members of your team during the selection process? And maybe a second part to that is to honor the integrity of the design once it does go out to bid. And contractors are not always full of integrity when on.
Really? I haven't seen that yet.
No, never. I'll leave that. And I love your front desk receptionist, Dane. He's a sweetheart. Thank you.
So as you know, if you've worked with our office, we have a librarian, Sue Stein, who's been there for many years and is amazing and kind of a legend. So I think it's a balance of a few things. One is trying to have access for new designs, new pieces, and so we do create that flow of new things. We have vendor events, we have things laid out. In terms of how do I direct studios or clients or contractors, it's a great question because there's a balance between exercising a lot of controls and letting the team have their own kind of idea about things. So there's certain consultants we love to work with, but we're always open to new consultants because I think that's where new ideas come from. And we try to do the same thing with all the furnishings, FF&E. We all try and stay curious to what new things are out there in the world. We try and make that a rigor of supporting relationships we have, explain to our clients that changing the price and the color and the size doesn't make it unique, it makes it a copy, and having that kind of rigor.
Okay. Oh. Okay.
Hi, my name is Vanessa. So I have a question about your firm. I know you have become very prominent and you have a lot of people working for you, but do you have a sales team that goes out and procures new jobs and new projects, or do they come to you, I'm sure, based off of your history and the amazing projects that you've worked on in the past? People come to you all the time, but how do you select those projects?
Well, we do have a new business team, and they do two things. They field incoming requests, or some work comes from relationships. But I think the work we tend to go after, whether we're going after it, it's coming to us, is based on who the client is. Is it a relationship we want to maintain? Is it a new relationship we want to engage in? Is it a kind of work we haven't done before? Is it an opportunity? So it's based on, do we see open space there and an opportunity? So that's how it's done. But I think when, in terms of new business, what we're trying to do is build long-term relationships. So in many cases, we might be interested in something. The JetBlue terminal, I had talked publicly about being interested in airport design for 4 or 5 years, and we had several false starts. So you have to be resilient too, and decide that the ones you don't get, you weren't meant to get, mostly.
Was there, yeah, one more over here. Was there someone over here? Okay.
Hi, I'm Helen. Well, first of all, my family actually has a sorry. I was gonna say my family's part-time owner to a winery in Napa, so I can really help you set up some recycled
Fantastic.
corks there.
Great.
Awesome.
Can you call them after? Okay.
Call me.
Yeah, great.
But yeah, that's not my question.
Oh, sorry, that you only get the one. I'm sorry about that. No. Go ahead.
So I know your interest in theater and art really like drives your design aesthetics, and like there's always a sense of narrative, like storytelling in your design. So for someone who is more interested on like for the residential side like me, how would you like incorporate that kind of storytelling way to like a residential design, also in an impactful way?
It's so funny. I spoke at an event, and several of the people who came up afterwards were really great residential designers, and I was talking to them because I think I actually would be interested in doing more residential design, but I think what we're not set up to do is the time signature of that is just a different level of engagement. I think it does seem to me that people who are hiring you to do a home want to be able to tell you what they're interested in, and then your job is to turn that into kind of a story that they wouldn't have expected. And that's really what we do in restaurants. We interview chefs and restaurateurs so that the outcome feels like it grows out of them. And I think the same would hold true for residential design, and it might have to be on smaller scales. What's the room that means the most? Is there, and come to them. I think having ideas that you develop before you get to the client and enriching your mind with ideas and thoughts is a critical way to do that.
You mentioned that you, in a way, you'd like to do residential design, but then the mechanics of it don't always fit.
But for the right thing, I would.
Okay. Good to know. I guess in wrapping up, I'm curious though, with all of the different kinds of projects that you've done and all the directions that you've gone in, what are you longing to do that you haven't yet really gotten to do as much as you would like?
I don't know that I look at the world that way. I'm longing to continue to do what I do. There's sort of some dream projects out there. I'd love to do an opera house or a concert hall. I came close. I'd love to do a football stadium. For a couple reasons. One is it doesn't make sense to me that such a big building's only used 20 times a year. So I think there's an opportunity there, and I'm on it.
Okay, you're on it. You're talking to.
I'm on it.
Okay.
I'd like to work with the whole group of people to do an amazing park. I'd like to kind of bring multiple people in to create a great park.
Got it. Okay. Well, these are
An airplane interior.
an airplane interior. You haven't done.
Categories of where I spend a little time that aren't well designed.
And is that all joking aside? Is that sometimes what leads to you to pursue things?
Yeah.
Is you're in a space and you're thinking this is terrible. Why I can do better?
Not terrible, but I see opportunities, things left on the table.
Yeah. But the biggest point is 40 years in, let's keep going.
Oh, totally. I think I really do feel the best work we're doing is the work we're doing now, and I don't think it's delusional. I think it's true. But I think it's from just great people, great partners, both partners at Rockwell Group and clients, and continuing to be willing to try new things and take chances.
You're so involved in the city, and you love New York so
Yeah.
much. I'm curious your thoughts on the evolution of where you think New York is going. It seems as if so many of these commercial buildings really are perhaps going to be converted into residential spaces. But beyond that, what do you imagine happening?
Well, what we tend to avoid looking at trends, because I think by the time you can put your finger on it, it's morphed and changed. I think if you look at the history of New York, one of the things that's happened in the last 20 years is the city has reopened itself to the water. Like, it's found a way to celebrate the water. I think there'll be some interesting opportunities for how to create magnets in different neighborhoods. Parks might be part of it. But, you know, I think the city is resilient. I don't think it's at its best right now. And, you know, one of the interesting things is all the vacant storefronts, which I do think are, and, you know, I've had many thoughts and opportunities and written about it and tried to pursue things to do. But one of the ways I think the city, just speculating, may evolve is shorter term uses. So cultural uses that only need space for 6 months may find a way to share, time share, and the city being a 24-hour-a-day city will morph new ways to take advantage of the density of street life.
Okay. Well, as you say, the city is resilient, and the city will reinvent itself, yes?
Yes.
So we can feel hopeful about.
There's no point in not feeling hopeful.
Excellent.
That's the easy way out.
Well, you're so generous to come and spend time with us. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Will you please join me in thanking the restaurant? That's great. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. Thank you again for coming, everyone. It was such a pleasure.